right, guys, Melissa here. How's everyone doing? Um, Wanted to get on here this morning and talk. So, I have a son who's up in New Hampshire. He just got there. He needs housing. Is family helping? Nah. Why would they, right? The hypocrisy is unbelievable to me. Unbelievable. I heard when my son was in the truck, my husband in the truck, oh my goodness, you're left in a truck, you poor little thing, kind of thing, right? From family. Um, we're the real Christians. We're the real people who help people. So he's in a truck, big boy, can take care of himself, has money, has a job, everything. So, my son, looking for work, looking for housing, no help, right? The hypocrisy is astonishing. So I had a friend today say, I'm kind of looking out for my, not doing it for him, but looking for places for him to help him out. So I contacted some people I know, Christian friends, etc. Found a couple numbers. So one of my friends is like, I was telling him I miss New Hampshire, and he's like, come on back, come back to New Hampshire. And I do miss New Hampshire. And there's New Hampshire's me, right? All my roots are in New Hampshire. So, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about, I'm not finding a lot of work here. I had a job interview yesterday. They're like, what brings you here? And I'm like, Indeed. And they're like, oh, we didn't know that we were looking for help. And so, I'm like, look, I'm just looking for a job. At this point, it doesn't matter. Pretty much whatever it is for the most part, as long as it's pretty moral. My son was like, one of my other sons is like, hey, mom, sometimes you can't afford, the luxury of morals in life. And this is a son who is way out there. Last I knew, California, Washington, and he's done some he's done a lot to just make it, and my heart goes out to him. Corporate America is very greedy, and he used to tell me things that him and his friends used to do in order to beat the system, Um, so anyways, this person's like, why don't you come back to New Hampshire? And I'm looking at the job market, and, people have said out here in Colorado, they take forever to get back at you to get back to you. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that. I called a job I applied for 2 weeks ago. And they're like, well, yesterday, she's busy. She'll get back to you. And I'm like, holy cow, 2 weeks here I've been waiting? Never have had this problem with jobs, right? Then yesterday she's like, well, I can get back to you Thursday, but I can probably only give you 2 days. I'm like, whatever you got, that's fine with me. 2 days is good. So, it's tough out here, in my opinion, to get jobs. But on the other hand, I am willing to take a crappy job in order to get a good job. So on the other hand, I've got this really good company who sent me a test yesterday, and they're looking to hire me. And this morning I got a message that they want to move forward with me. So if I can take a crappy job to survive and get the good job, that's kind of the plan right now. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of. But if that falls through, then yeah, I might have to go back to New Hampshire for work. So I want to talk today about New Hampshire. I'll talk about New Hampshire a bit, but I want to talk about one of the things that was one of the most painful things in my life besides the abortion. And this is going to tie in with abortion. So I grew up with an uncle that I absolutely loved and adored. And my uncle Bill, that was his name, Billy Joe. And he was the best uncle someone could have. He really brought a lot of joy in my life, a lot of fun with me and my brother. My brother and I grew up small town of Epsom. My father had to work really hard to move us from Suncook into a house, full of eggshells, no cement on the floor, just a basic house. And because he had construction abilities, very good construction worker. He was able to fix up that house really cheap. And so my brother and I were outside playing a lot. We had we had our relatives around. We had a really good childhood. Some people have said, with this kind of situation with your mother and your father and the abortion, you must have had a rotten childhood. And I didn't. I did not. I had an extremely, almost idealistic childhood where I had, I was popular in school. I had, nice clothes thanks to my mother. We always had food on the table. In those ways on the outside, it was very good. Food, clothes, roof over our head. Very outside on the community, bow and arrow shoots every single weekend, family, friends, the train station, people coming over all the time. And that was all great on the outside. So, my huge families, the Cates, my Uncle Bill, Bill Cate, he had known him since I was a kid, obviously. When we started off in Suncook on Glass Street, he was just a teenager. I mean, probably, let me see, he was probably like 15, 16 when I was born, maybe. Maybe, let me see, no. Kim was about 10 years older. He was probably actually like about, yeah. So maybe he was like, 10ish when I was born. He would come over. I think my earliest memory of him was maybe 15 or so. And I was dancing in my room. Thought I was hot stuff. I was dancing to, my mother gave me a record player. She gave me all her records, Delta Dawn, all this music I used to listen to. Had my own microphone, had a big bureau with a big round mirror, long hair like an Indian, and I thought I was hot stuff singing. So I remember being in my room thinking I'm alone, practicing my singing, and I turn around and do a twirl, and my Uncle Bill is at the door laughing at me, trying to control himself and not let his presence be known, right? And he couldn't take it anymore. He was cracking up laughing at me. So he totally embarrassed me. To this day, I can still feel that embarrassment. And he could not stop laughing at me. So I have tons of memories of good, like all good memories. I don't think I have a bad memory at all of my Uncle Bill. So he was brought up in the projects, rough life. He used to come over to our place all the time, hunting, fishing, outdoorsy guy. Took me and my brother sledding, took us to haunted houses. Oh my goodness, soccer. We used to go over to him and his wife Brenda's house. They did not stay together, but we used to go over there in Epsom, go over to their house, play soccer. I mean, just all of our time was around either there or my Aunt Kim, my grandfather's, a trailer, Munn's Trailer Park in Epsom. He had his issues with all the kids, but, he never disowned my mother. Him and my mother, he was there for my mother. My grandmother was not, but he was there. My mother fell down once, she said, and broke her leg on her skateboard, and my grandfather was the one who went and picked her up and helped her. And he had like 3 jobs. So I don't know why, I would have a father who would disown me and why my mother would allow such things. She used to say after my father disowned me, well, you know your father, you know how he is. He'll come around. You just let him cool off. And I'm just like, holy cow, I didn't even do anything, right? And so, anyways, my Uncle Bill was someone I was really close to growing up. Even my dances, when I took dance, he would, come to the recitals. My Uncle Steve I was very close to up until, he went to jail for cocaine. And that was really sad because he used to wrestle with us. Him and Bill were like the brothers who were always, giving me and my brother tons of attention. So that was really hard as a teenage girl, that I lost my Uncle Steve to drugs in my life. We used to play football together. I remember we were playing tackle football and I actually grabbed his shirt once at my grandfather's and ripped his shirt. He's like, Melissa, you ripped my shirt. This is like my only nice shirt. And I think he was on his way to a date or something. My Uncle Steve was like a Rocky Balboa. I mean, extremely good looking. The rumor was he could have any girl he wanted. I mean, he would go to the bars, get in fights, and he was a ladies kind of man. But anyways, I loved my Uncle Steve. They used to throw us on the bed. So when I was growing up, when I started my family, I was busy with my family. So I still would see Bill, but not as much. And we had our ebbs and flows of, still seeing each other. And now, and he was remarried, and I, watched his kids when he was, when in his first marriage, Chris and BJ. I watched Ashley. I watched, when my husband and I moved into an apartment, we were in their apartment. When he moved out, and him and Tina were together. I went to his second wedding with Tina. So I was always, ebb and flow in his life. So when I had my family, I still saw him. And when I had worked at Dunkin's on Fisherville, right before I was, no, right when I was married, I worked over there. And, my Uncle Bill was always there. Um, so he was always in my life. So what was difficult for me was at the end of his life, he died like at my age, 53, 54. He died. He went to McDonald's. He was walking over there for some reason, and he came out of McDonald's. It was something he always did. One of the last times I saw him was over there. He's like, he always had coffee, and I had to hurry up. This is when my kids were little, actually, was when I saw him there. I had to hurry up and bring one of my kids to the dentist, so I had my sandals on, and he's like, clump, 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 clump. And I'm like, I'm in a rush. And he's like, oh my goodness, you're so loud. And then when I used to live in his old place, I had my own place first next to him, and he's like, holy cow, you slam those cupboards every night. We can hear you every night slamming those cupboards. And he would always like correct me in a playful way. But before he died, he died. He was walking home from McDonald's, had a heart attack, and it was a total shock to everyone. So right before he died, I just happened to see him everywhere. I mean, I brought my son to Walmart to get a fishing license. He was there. He was there with his grandson, and I actually got to hug his little grandson. And then, I was on the road. He'd beep, I beep. Always saw him. One of the last times I saw him was at Dunkin's. I saw I think his motorcycle there. So I pull in, and he comes out, and he's saying hi to my kids and stuff with me. And so it was raining, and I put the windshield wipers on because of the rain, right? And he's standing next to my vehicle, and the wipers just threw the rain on his shirt. And he's like, Melissa, this is my new shirt. And he's like, you got it all wet. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And I kept laughing. And he's like, I have a date. So that was one of my last memories of getting his shirt soaked. And we laughed together all the time. And I did get to share the gospel with him before he died. He had like this, what was it? Not a skateboard, this like newest skate thing out. And he's like, do you want to try this? And I'm like, I got heels on. I'm not trying that with heels. He's like, oh yeah. So I was telling him where I was going to church, and he's like, oh, that's a really nice church that you're going to. And, so we talked, and I shared the gospel with him, and hopefully he's up in heaven. And you never know when someone calls on God, the last minute. But a lot of people right now, and this is where I'm going to tie this to the pro-life movement, would say, oh, if you've had a rough life, you don't want to have a kid because they're going to have a rough life. If you can't afford your kids, they're going to have a rough life. It's kind of like It's a Wonderful Life. My uncle had a rough life. Okay, they were in the projects. They all had it rough. But once they grew up, they turned their life around. And my Uncle Bill was an amazing carpenter. He could build anything, and that's something that he did on the side. He built like his wife Brenda had like this awesome dining room cabinet when I was growing up. He built like their furniture. He he learned this on his own. He like, when I was in McDonald's with him going clump, 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 he's like, I'm trying to read. And he had a book with, on more carpentry skills. He was just very smart, extremely smart, street smart, book smart. None of them really, I don't think they really ever finished school except my Uncle Mark. He was in his room all the time growing up in the projects. Word is he was reading all the time. And he ended up like IBM or something like that. Really good job just from reading all the time. So people will say, if they've had a rough life, if you can't afford kids, you shouldn't have them. That is one of the biggest lies out there. So you don't know what's going to happen when you have kids. You don't know how they're going to turn out. You don't know if you have like, I don't know if Mark moved up to, president or what he moved up to, but I mean, he made very good income. Um, Bill, where would I be without him? And it's like, it's a wonderful life. If in that movie, that guy, he regrets ever living, and they're like, okay, well, let's pretend you never lived. And this is what would happen if you were not alive. So sometimes I think, if my Uncle Bill was not alive, where would I have been in life? And he was such a huge positive influence in my life. Um, I don't know where I would have been without him. He just, I mean, I would have had a huge void. He was an amazing uncle, to me, to my brother. To this day, I think everyone still misses him, and it was a real shock when he died. I mean, I didn't hear about, well, family didn't tell me. I heard it on the street, which really ticked me off because, I'm part of that family. But I guess my grandmother just was in total shock. Everyone was in shock. The obituary didn't come out until like weeks later. I mean, it was just late. It was really late. Everyone just kind of couldn't pull things together. I did not go to his funeral. I was just like, I had, my mother was giving me a hard time. My grandmother, my Uncle Bill knew it too. They were just giving me a bunch of grief. And so I didn't go. And I did apologize to, a couple of his kids that I wasn't going. But I did. I mean, I was devastated. I actually heard it on the street. My son happened to be working at a Dunkin's he knew someone who told him about it. They were like, "Hey, did you hear Bill Kate died?" Everyone knew everyone, right? And he's like, "Wait a minute, you mean Uncle Bill? Wait, Bill Kate?" And they're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "That's my uncle. That's my great uncle." And so he came home. This is through my son. He's like, "Hey, I got bad news." I'm like, "What? Did you get quit? Did you get fired from your job?" He's like, "No, it's worse than that." And he was really sober. And I'm like, "What? What is it?" And he goes, to this day, he goes, "Uncle Bill died." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Uncle Bill died." And I'm like, "No, he didn't." And he's like, "Yeah, he did." And he's like, "This is what," he told me the story. And I was just like, I mean, just like now I can tear up thinking about it. But I just like fell apart. I'm like, no way, and I went to my room and I cried for probably a good couple hours. Probably one of the only times I really had a really good cry in my life. So, I was devastated. I was totally devastated that someone like my Uncle Bill would die just like that. But it took me a little while, but you know someone your whole entire life and it's just like, wow. So, what I have now is a lot of good memories. I have tons of memories, and that's what we give to one another, right? Someone lives in our heart, and my Uncle Bill, he still lives in my heart. And he still lives in my heart. And that can never ever be taken away. So that is what we have when someone dies. And I hope he's in heaven. But don't, for people, we need to change society. We really do. For people to be like, oh, it's okay to abort if you cannot, if you can't afford, your kids. My grandmother would have never aborted. She was a very strong Catholic. No matter what she did wrong, she didn't go around killing her kids. I will say that about her. No matter how messed up she was, she did not kill her kids. And as a matter of fact, she wanted to get on the birth control pill. I think after so many kids, and her father, being a very staunch Catholic, was like, no, you are not going on the pill. And finally, after number 10, she's like, screw you, I'm on the pill. We hardly have any money, and I'm going on the pill. And she's like, unless you're not the one having them. So um she didn't abort, and that is one thing that I will say I can give to my grandmother. She did have 10 kids, and to walk in her shoes, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine how I was a little bit harsh on her for some of the things, some of the choices she made in life. When she was older, she would do the rosary and ask God to forgive her like every day for some of the things she's done. But, the rosary is in vain. And I would tell her, you don't need the rosary. God just forgives you if you ask. And so I cannot imagine having 10 kids with nothing. I mean, I had 5 and I got a lot of help, and I made it work. I mean, my kids, even though I got all the help that I wanted and needed, they did not go without. I took the bullet. I was the one getting all the help, so they did not feel it. And they always had food, clothes, a roof over their head, good relationships with me and their dad. They did before he did this. A community, a healthy community. So they had a lot, and were homeschooled, and just had a really good life where they were not being pulled into all that garbage that I had in my background, in my family. So you have no right. Nobody has a right to abort children and say, well, they may have a rough life. Okay, so what if they have a rough life? They're still alive, and they have potential to change. Just like my uncle changed, my Mark had changed his life. I mean, they are survivors. My Aunt Kim had her own business. I think she still does. Um, my mother has money. In the end, she has money. She married into money, and she has money. And my brother, he is pretty successful. So you have no right to take a life and to play God and decide who should live and who should not. And nowadays, where corporate America is running so many of people's lives, we are not having the time to have relationships and to develop meaningful lives. And we need to go back to that. We need to go back to some of the old days of just having childhoods that I remember, where family is there for one another, good or bad. They're there for one another, through thick and thin. There's a song my mother used to play when we would drive to Manchester called We Are Family. And I heard that the other day, and every time I hear that song, I think of her with her sisters. And no matter what they went through in life, they stuck together. And I think we need stronger families, and we need to stick together. And we're just living in a day and age where pornography is running rampant, sex trafficking, drugs. I almost lost a son to fentanyl. Something was laced and he almost died. And I mean, we're just living in a society that is so greedy. This is why I'm minimalist. We need to take back our time over our money, and we need to build families and go back to that. So that's what I got for now. Abortion is not part of family planning, Planned Parenthood. What are you planning to do? You're planning to kill your children until you are ready to have children? That makes no sense. The perfect ideal will never come. You will never be completely ready. Actually, kids get you ready. You never are ready. Never. There's always something else to be growing in and learning with your kids. So that's what I got for now, guys. Thanks for joining me.